So my lesson is aimed at 9th through 12th graders or high school level. I am going to go over Blackout Poetry, which is everybody's favorite form of poetry. So in the comments in the chat, or if you'd prefer to say it out loud, I want you to tell me your very first gut reaction to the word poetry. Positive, negative, doesn't matter. What are your feelings towards poetry? All right, I'm seeing hard, rhyming. Okay, so yeah, if you ask any old person on the street, strange, they're gonna say poetry is weird, it doesn't make sense, there's too many rules, it's kind of cheesy. But a lot of people don't realize that poetry is more than Dr. Seuss and Shakespeare and rhyming. I mean, if you think about it, songs are poetry, and everybody at least has one favorite song. Like everybody likes music, at least one type. So poetry is one of those things that's kind of all encompassing, which makes it overwhelming and still hard, but it doesn't have to be as terrifying as everybody makes it out to be. So what makes you have that gut reaction that you had? What makes you think it's hard? What makes you think it's strange? If you would like to share.
I don't like teaching poetry.
So from a teacher's perspective, it's just
yes. And I remember as a student, I remember being asked to write a poem as a student and just feeling like frozen by that. Like it was too much. I didn't have any entry into how do I actually do that.
For me, it was just forming the overall structure of it. That was the tricky thing for me. It was the structure of it.
Because it feels like it's so structured that you're not allowed any room to play, and it's just very overwhelming. And from a teacher's perspective, I totally get that. That's why I've been like, I never want to teach reading, because it's like, how do you teach someone something you just do, right? So I totally get both of those things. So my observations from seeing y'all's is the commonalities are it's too hard, it's too overwhelming, there's not really any structure, there's something to grab onto to figure out where you're going. So typically when people think of poetry, they're going to think of the traditional sonnets, rhyming verses, roses are red, violets are blue, so on and so forth. But the amazing thing about poetry is that there are over 50 types of poetry, ranging from rigidly structured from iambic pentameter from Shakespeare that we all know, to the wonderful land of free verse, which is literally you can write anything and say it's a poem and nobody can tell you it's not, because it's free verse and you're allowed to do that. So today we're going to be playing with a type of redacted poetry known as blackout poetry. Oops, that is not what I meant to do. Sorry. All right, so blackout poetry is literally what it sounds like. It is considered collaboration in its purest form. You can take any paper with words on it and you can make a poem out of it. Newspapers, novels, articles, other poems, if it's printed out and you have a black marker, you can make blackout poetry, which is a godsend for people like me who would rather ingest and enjoy other people's writing than have to come up with my own and do the hard work of literature. So I'm very much so of I would rather read or watch or listen. I don't want to write. I don't want to create. I want to enjoy the fruit of other people's labor. Good thing about blackout poetry is all the hard work's kind of already done. I just got to go off and kind of show what I take away from the work. So you can either make something completely different. You can pick out what stood out to you and just kind of make a summary of it. Blackout poetry is kind of a really cool thing, and it lets you acknowledge what someone else already did while also putting your own spin on it. So as you can see, regardless of what begins on the page, the creator is able to tell whatever story strikes them after reading the original work. So we have 3 versions right here. It says, a flawless sky sunk in the sand, a mind clouded with shooting flames. And it's a picture of a beach with the sun coming off of it. Paints a really vivid picture. And then we have this one. This is from H.G. Wells, which he is the author of War of the Worlds. So I kind of thought that was cool with Sasquatch. And this one kind of is like an anchor chart. It says, blackout poetry can be anything you find, big or small, complicated, simplicity, creativity through subtraction. So it's kind of giving you the freedom to do less is more almost. It's not asking you to create this big, epic Beowulf type of a thing. It's asking you, here's what you have, make something that is important to you. Especially with this one, I mean, this one's 4 words and it says, he was never guilty with a picture. And that tells enough of a story, right? Like you get it, you understand there's pain and suffering. And it's by Harper Lee, which is obviously To Kill a Mockingbird. So a lot of subtext, a lot of context clues can take this from just a normal picture poem someone doodled on the pages to an entirely new work on in and of itself. I mean, this could be the back cover of the book, if you ask me. This is a great introduction to what To Kill a Mockingbird is about. We have this one. It says, travel isn't about one set of rules rooted in mindfulness with a strong emphasis on playful streak. Both simple yet beautiful come together and make us feel right at home. So it's colorful, it's inviting, it's adding to the layer of traveling and finding your own home. And then we have this last one. It says, I was still for some reason linked with her eyes. So obviously this is about yearning for someone who probably isn't in your life anymore, maybe. It's up to interpretation, which is also a great thing about poetry, depending on who you ask. I mean, some people might say it's too ambiguous, it's so I don't really know what's going on. Some people like the ambiguity. To each their own, right? That's the great thing about literature. There's no rules, but then there's too many rules. So, so the primary text we're going to use for this lesson is Newspaper Blackout by Austin Kleon. It was written in 2010. And going back to these examples, I want you to think of the question, how was the author able to paint such a vivid picture when only using so few words? So focusing on this one for sure. How was the author of this poem able to paint such a vivid picture or emotional experience in your head with only using 4 words? You can type in the chat or you can unmute and answer the question.
I think the fact that there's so much black on that page, like the darkness, kind of the bleakness of guilt or assumed guilt or injustice kind of all comes across because so much of the page is just starkly black.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For me, I think like that as well, but I also like that instead of using just black, you also have color as well. So it's a good contrast. It's like, yes, it's blackout poetry, but you can think a little more outside the box and add color instead of just it being blacked out.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you're referencing this one? Yeah, I also found another example from a science textbook. A teacher had actually taken an old science textbook and made one about constellations and stars. I can't find the picture and I'm really sad I can't, but it was a telescope pointing to a picture of the Milky Way galaxy. So it was a really, really neat science kind of cross-curricular integration. So yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing so much. So my next question is, how can we say this poetry belongs to the author when the source material was written by someone else? Where do you think the lines of ownership are drawn when we talk about poetry like this?
I feel like this is similar to a remix.
Oh yeah, good point.
I was just thinking of that when you were talking about how blackout poetry is a collaboration, that like you take the source material like Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird and even the point of that poem there that he was never guilty, like that kind of sums up the story, but it's presented in a new way. So it feels sort of like a remix genre to me.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called? Like when you take a piece of music and put it into another.
Yeah, like you're sampling, like you're taking the music sample and putting it into another song and building another song around it. Yeah.
Yeah, or like you take one like a country song and turn it into a rap or whatever.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. That's a good connection. I like that. And my last question is, do you think this type of poetry is easier to create than more traditional poetry? And when I say traditional poetry, I'm meaning like a fixed rhyme scheme it's very rigid. It has stanzas, all that stuff. Totally your opinion. No wrong answers.
With that, I think, yes, it is easier because in a way you can create your own work from it. I know that's like from the previous question, it's like, no, not quite, but in a way, like, yes, like
Yeah.
you're making it your own. So like, yes, it is theirs, but you've made it to where it's yours and not theirs. There's some way that you've tweaked it to where you've created it as your own.
Yeah. So it's
So in
like,
a way,
yeah, completely existing in the gray area of the ethical intellectual property area. It's not, this is mine, this is theirs, no meeting in the middle. So it's kind of fun. All right. Let's see. I'm going to read some selections from newspaper Blackout, and then if we have any comments about them, we can talk about them further. So this one is called Sing to Me. It's on page 23. It says, "Sing to me, oh muse, I have the time and the spot." I love anything talking about muses. I just think the whole concept of muses is just such a beautiful thing. Like inspiration is so hard to come by, and when you find that one thing that can really like just trigger it all the time, that's just, I don't know, that's the English lit minor in me coming out. And this next one is called Time Machine. It's on page 25. It says, "Take the government's advice when you start the time machine. That past study groups found childhood, despite the memories people described, is much likelier to be the other way around." So everybody, especially nowadays, are yearning for days of old. Everything was so much easier way back when, but it's really saying if you were to actually go back, you'd be looking for the greener grass that you were in when you were older. So it's just kind of taking pause and saying, look at it with fondness, but don't discount where you are now, where you've gotten far. So that one's really good. This next one is entitled Fireflies. It's on page 42. It reads, "Catching fireflies saves everything." I'm sorry. "Catching fireflies saves everything. For one fleeting evening, two thin circus freaks with unrelenting grins. I remember floating. The play so full of potential, you and me out after the lights." So it's, I take it as that those moments where everything is just perfect, like movie moments. There's music in the background. It's a montage. Everything is nice. There's lights and fairy lights, and it's just magical. If you ever seen Perks of Being a Wallflower and they talk about the tunnel song, it's Heroes by David Bowie, and it's just like the one perfect moment that they're always trying to chase and recapture. So that's why I picked that one. This next one is entitled Swashbuckle. It's on page 55. It says, "The idea had its roots in a B movie. We were poised to reconcile. He wanted to swashbuckle." So we were supposed to be a love story. He's not following the script. It's not my fault. What are you gonna do? So that's the reason I like these poems is they're not, for me, they don't take themselves too seriously. Like they're kind of ambiguous, but if you read them and really like think about them, you can see what they're trying to say. And because for me, some poetry is like, chill out. Like it's not that deep. Like you're trying too hard and it shows on the page. So if your stuff isn't fun to read, nobody's gonna want to read it. So, I mean, obviously there's gonna be some things that aren't fun to read because of the subject matter, but don't torture me making me read your stuff. So I'm gonna show this quick video about how the author who did Newspaper Blackout, this is his process on how he creates his works. So I'm going to play this really quick. Hopefully the audio works. Can y'all hear that? We're all able? Oh, okay. My favorite part of that video is him showing the OG Instagram layout. Like kids these days have no idea. So anyways, that's ancient history. No, shush. Okay. So now we are going to practice doing our own version of Blackout Poetry. Of course, if we were together, I would have brought in a bunch of newspapers and markers and scissors and all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to read over this excerpt from The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, and you are going to create your own Blackout Poetry and then, or Blackout poem. And then after 10 minutes, we will come back together and we'll share our creations. So I'm going to set a timer and y'all come back when you're ready. All right, I am so sorry with how that video ended. That was so harsh. Okay. Goes from calming rain to air raid siren. All right, so while y'all are finishing up, I'm gonna go ahead and share my example of blackout poetry. So mine says, let her hurry back to the road of yellow brick. They kept walking. Her eyes closed in spite. She forgot where she fell. Leave her here. The smell of flowers is killing us all. Little mistress, not troubled by the scent of the flowers, run fast to the deadly flower bed. Bring the little girl with you. You were too big to be carried. So I think as I went on and as I was reading it, I kind of got to where it was like a commentary on how as women grow up, they are considered too big to be emotionally cared for or physically cared for too. They're just kind of cast aside and told to figure it out. And you're only as worthy as how pretty you are. Kind of, maybe that's where I was going with it. But that was my example. So if y'all would be so kind to share yours, I am so excited to hear them and see them.
Mine was kind of like, I guess, in a fight or flight situation. Not as good as yours though, but mine was the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow agreed. Leave her here. The lion, the scarecrow, and the Tin Woodman run fast. So the lion ran out of sight.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome.
So mine, the first thing that I noticed was the smell of the flowers is killing us all. And then I thought that I actually wanted to go the opposite direction. And so I tried to be cheerful and colorful with mine this time.
Oh, I love the color. Yeah.
And I got out my secret stash of markers. And I tried to make it the opposite of the situation. So mine says, get back among the poppies, being not troubled, run fast to this flower bed, bound forward.
Oh, I love it. My favorite thing about doing this and doing this with kids is it doesn't matter what the source material is, everybody's going to come out with something different, which I think is also a good like SEL life lesson too. I mean, you can all start off with the same ingredients, but it's your creativity and your experiences that bring the certain like specialness to every day and every situation. So thank y'all so much for sharing. I love them. This is so much fun. I wish we could do this all day. If you liked this book, I have included some extra books for you to read as well. I have Finding Light in the Darkness, a collection of blackout poetry by Michael Mears. Sounds Complicated by Stacey Lee. Distance Between by another one by Stacey Lee. And then I thought this one's my favorite. It's a blackout poetry version of Moby Dick by Herman Melville. It's a whole book redone by, who's the author? Catherine Maloney. So that's a really cool resource that I found that I actually kind of want to go and track down. When I tried to look for it, it was a bunch of like eBay sketchy looking sites. So still, the jury's still out on that one. But if I ever find it, I'll be excited. So my closing question, it's a Padlet, so I'm going to put it in the chat. But my closing question is there a correct way to write poetry? And I'm going to put that link in the chat for y'all to post if this will get out of my way, the little Zoom bar. Give me 1 second, please. There we go. Okay, I'm going to post this in the chat. And if y'all could please give me, what did I say? 1 to 2, 2 to 3 sentences of your answer, yes or no, and why you feel that way. Give you, does it work? Did y'all get it? The link? Okay, perfect. And if you've never used Padlet, there's a little pink circle right here. Oh my gosh, I wish this would go away. And you type yes or no. And there you go. Is it letting y'all post, or are y'all still working on them? Just making sure I'm not, okay. Just like awkwardly sitting here staring at y'all, sorry. There we go. Okay. No, there's not a correct way to write poetry because poetry is intended to express emotions. I love it. So I really like ending lessons on like an opinion question because they're so open and you can get so many different responses, especially when it's stuff like this where there's not really a way to end it other than, okay, that's it, let's go to the next class. So Padlet is also cool because I like sometimes if the stuff is really profound, I'll print it out and like post it or I'll rewrite it or whatever. My students now, they love doing these Padlets because they can add pictures and selfies. So they'll take a selfie of themselves and however they're feeling and then add it to that. So they love Padlet. Yeah, so I mean, no, like I didn't know that there were 50 types of poetry, over 50 types of poetry before I did research for this lesson. So there really isn't a correct way to write it. So that's why I wanted to pick this. I know it's kind of I learned it's a cliche to do blackout poetry in high school, but if I had done this in high school, I probably wouldn't have hated poetry as much as I did, probably still do. But that was my lesson. Thank you so much for participating. I'm going to stop recording now. I can find the stop record button. Okay.